Requesting everybody to settle in and be seated. We're going to start the final session very soon. Welcome to the final session of the day and the conference. I'd like to call upon stage Mr. Azishan Abedin, Program Manager, BIGD Brack University, to share the conference synopsis.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hello and welcome on behalf of BIGD to the concluding session of our 3-day conference. What I'm going to present is not very original. It's my attempt to summarize what has sort of transpired in the last 2.5 days and set the stage for the actual concluding session that Anir Bhai will be moderating shortly. So, as many of you who were here, we started this conference on Monday morning. Both Professor Stefan Durkon and Anir Chaudhary presented separate keynotes. And I think my team put together a highlight of what we extracted from their very wise words. So the first one, the biggest takeaway was digitalization in developing countries. From their very wise words. I think there's some feedback. Digitalization in developing countries hinging on 3 basic elements as defined by Stefan and also features in his book. Bureaucratic politics, economic interest, elite commitment. I think he'll elaborate on those again today during the closing session. We also heard from a visiting fellow at BIGD and a professor of economics from Dhaka University, Professor Shahadat, who took a deep dive into two levels of digital divide that urgently need to be addressed in Bangladesh. And those are in the form of access to digital services and also digital literacy inherently. Digital literacy, again, was accompanied through a further sort of examination or investigation where we saw that sector by sector and service by service, it actually needs to be defined. There's no one size fit all definition that can be assigned to digital literacy, and therefore the job of addressing any lack of digital literacy thereby becomes even more complex. Mushtaq Khan talked about asymmetric power, and we've heard of this thesis of his not only this week but earlier. And I think for digitalization in particular, that has become very foundational, where information availability and power asymmetry sort of are issues that go hand in hand and need to be sort of co-addressed. We had a very interesting session at the end of the day on birth registration or civil registration in general. We had representation from the government. The Registrar General was here. Cabinet Division was also represented by a former government personnel. And I think our executive director sort of framed it very nicely, where he said that citizens should be at the very center of any effective system on digitalization that Bangladesh adapts. Moving on to day two, our very own gender cluster at BIGD looked at how digital transformation has disparities across both gender and socioeconomic groups. And again, building on what Professor Shahadat said on day one about access to devices and digital literacy, these were further expanded from a or further looked into through a gender lens. We were very privileged to have, despite being a organization or a research organization of focusing on social sciences, I think we made a great attempt successfully in making this conference very interdisciplinary, where Nabil Mohammed Bhai, who's here at the back, and others, along with Munshi Bhai, we had a very technical discussion on natural language processing, NLP, and the various challenges surrounding it, and sort of a lot of room for further discovery and improvement in that realm. Day two also talked about, we had a very lengthy session where Fahim Mashroor of BD Jobs and other, well, sort of representing other online platforms and the gig economy broadly. We talked about how we can formalize, and the digitalization process has a lot of, has to account for a lot of contextual and other nuances before we know the right way to do it. I'll go a little fast. We had dedicated sessions on health at the end of the day, and also at the beginning of day three, we had a dual session chaired by a former cabinet secretary of the government of Bangladesh on education. And some of the notable points that came up from that session, Professor Ruknuzaman of North South University talked about the replication economy, how we sometimes mindlessly replicate what's going on in other countries without looking clearly or without spending enough time on contextualizing it for Bangladesh. And I think, and he certainly thinks that economic focus and the job market sort of linkage to the way digitalization needs to happen in Bangladesh is sort of missing or needs to be a bit more pronounced. We talked about a very, I think, pertinent aspect of digitalization, where um, people differently abled or what is known as disabilities, how digitalization may sort of be a hindrance in access or, or, or create a hindrance for their access to several services. And that is something, again, that needs to be taken into account before we move further in this digitalization journey. And finally, I think many of you in the room were here for the session that just preceded this. Fahim Bhai and Pooja, they talked about different facets of data privacy and what happens with our data. So I think with that, the stage is probably set for Anir Bhai to take it away with the rest of the panel. So thank you, moderator, and thank you, rest of the panel.
Thank you, Mr. Abedin. The concluding session entails a panel discussion to create a call for action for a better future based on the findings and insights from this conference and beyond. The esteemed panel will be moderated by Mr. Anu Chaudhry, Policy Advisor, A2I Government of Bangladesh, and the discussants are Dr. Stephen Durkin, Professor of Economic Policy, Blavatnik School of Government, University of Oxford, Dr. Mushtaq H. Khan, Professor of Economics, School of Oriental and African Studies, University of London, Mr. Muhammad Humayun Kobir, Joint Secretary, Cabinet Division, Government of Bangladesh, Dr. Khondokar Azizul Islam, Additional Secretary, Planning and Development Wing, ICT Division, Government of Bangladesh, Mr. Asif Saleh, Executive Director, BRAC Bangladesh, Dr. Imran Mutin, Executive Director, BIGD, BRAC University, and Dr. Nabil Muhammad, Associate Professor, North-South University. I'd kindly request the moderator and the discussants to come up on stage and proceed with the panel discussion. Thank you.
So welcome again, everybody. I think we've had a fascinating 3 days, starting on Monday, covering a whole range of issues on digitization, starting from policy, vision, technology, bureaucracy, non-profits, private sector. So a whole range of things that we have covered. I think brilliantly put together by Sajad Bhai in terms of topics and people as well. So we've covered a whole range of things. So we have the last hour really, and we have a large panel, as Asif pointed out. It's a manel, so it's all men. We don't have female representation. But let's talk about call for action. So what's happening in the future? And we were just talking right outside about knowledge generation, knowledge dissemination, and knowledge consumption and application. So during COVID, we actually saw an acceleration of knowledge generation, right? I mean, we actually saw that we tried a lot of very innovative experiments in health, in social safety nets, in governance, in coordination, not only within government, but also between public and private entities. So a lot of experiments happened. Now, the knowledge that was generated in a very fast pace during this time may have been used during that time, but the important question is, have we captured it in a way that is useful for the next set of years, for the next set of actors? I was just telling Asif that we were asked to capture some of the best practices during COVID using what we did during digitization. And first, we wrote a few research papers. Each was about 20 pages. So short research papers. It was 20 pages short for a research paper. And that was useful for the academia. But then many policymakers said that it's too long. Like, I can't read through all these 20 pages and there are graphs and charts, not good. So then we worked on 2 pages, sort of marketing materials. Then those were useful for some. Then the next request was, no, this is also too long. I don't have time to read. So I have time to see a 1-minute video. So maybe a 1-minute video was produced then. So we did research papers, then marketing materials, and then 1-minute explainer video. So what is the right form of knowledge capture that appeals to different types of people? So there is a lot of knowledge. So COVID was an example of accelerated knowledge creation and maybe even consumption and application. But in general, during peacetime, I mean, now it's not a peacetime with the Ukraine and the floods going on, but there are peace times also. And then knowledge is always being generated. So what is the partnership that we can really think about as far as knowledge generation, knowledge dissemination, capture, and application is concerned? I think that's one of the things that we should talk about in this panel. And that's very important. I'd like to go to Mushtaq Bhai first. So one of the things that was discussed in the last panel discussion, last speakers, was the digital divide issue, right? So what digitization helps and what digitization harms? If you can talk from that standpoint, and how do we capture that, right? So because sometimes digitization is done mindlessly by governments, by private sector, by non-profit sector. But how do we make it much more intelligent so that the marginalized, who should be really the beneficiary of digitization, really benefits?
Thanks, Anir. I think the call for action has to be based on an understanding of where we are. And digitalization is a massive challenge across the globe, and it's a transition that every country is going through. But developing countries are going through multiple transitions on top of the digital transition. And we shouldn't forget that. We are going through a developmental transition, we are going through a governance transition, and we are going through a digital transition. So our challenge is much more difficult than the already very difficult challenge in the advanced countries. I'm reminding people of the obvious, but the digital technology is radically different from other forms of technology because the organization that controls the data has what economists call network economies, which makes that organization a new kind of natural monopoly that didn't exist before. That organization can provide better and cheaper services without restricting entry to the market. Now, most monopolies are monopolies because there is some restriction of entry to the market. But data creates monopolies without restrictions on the market. The first mover becomes the dominant player. We've seen this in advanced countries with the digital platform players. The same is true for government. Government with data has new forms of power and new forms of efficiency, but it also can be misused in the same way that private data can be misused. Now, advanced countries are struggling with this new challenge because the standard approach of breaking up monopolies actually will raise prices in this case, unless it's done very carefully. And there's a lot of, Stefan will be able to add to this. There are very complicated ways in which you can do it, which increases competition without raising prices. But it's not the same for government data. Right? Now, here is the challenge for a country like Bangladesh. We are a largely informal society. Most of our economic activity is informal. And as we were discussing earlier, the ways in which government services are provided if you look at the organogram and the service provision chart of the official government services analog, nobody follows it. You actually don't get your service by following the rules. You have multiple sources of entry and multiple informal connections, contacts, tadbir, etc., through which services are provided. Now, you might think that is a problem, but actually it is not a problem, because one of the other factors of Bangladesh's political economy, apart from the governance, is that despite some forms of power being very concentrated in our society, actually, the reason why Bangladesh is a dynamic economy and has developed so fast is because there are lots of horizontal checks and balances lower down in society. These horizontal checks and balances means that the powerful cannot grab everything. The less powerful people find ways of stopping it by building horizontal coalitions. So in other countries, in Asia or Africa, when power gets concentrated at the top, for example, all kinds of things become concentrated. But in Bangladesh, they don't become concentrated, right? So if someone is coming to grab my land, I might not be very powerful, but I find some horizontal relationships that I can use to block this activity. This is what is the strength of Bangladesh. This is also why NGOs have been so successful in Bangladesh, why a lot of social delivery has been so successful in Bangladesh, is because it's a society where if you forget these horizontal networks, you are missing the story. These horizontal networks are really powerful. And the ways in which we have managed a system where governance has been weak is because people have found ways of getting access to services, access to resources by mobilizing these horizontal networks. Now, one of the inadvertent dangers of too rapid digitalization and formalization is we are not really understanding how society actually works now before jumping into an alternative type of society where services will be formally delivered through a formal mechanism, which people weren't following anyway, right? So in societies where there is already a formal mechanism, you can digitalize it. But if the formal mechanism is informal, what are you digitalizing? Then how is the error correction going to work that I have not been included in this list, or I am not on that list? How do I enter this if this entry, I am blocking some of these horizontal tadbir mechanisms, the other mechanisms through which people have been able to enter the system? Now, ultimately, we want to go to a completely formal system. The question is, and this is what we are working with the A2I, is that path, that sequence. That sequence should be one that you don't too rapidly close down these error correction mechanisms, because the strength of Bangladesh has been the error correction mechanisms. And these error correction mechanisms have been largely informal. And we should, all I would say, the call for action is, we should make sure that we are not shutting down these error correction mechanisms. And particularly, not just for the really, underprivileged and poor, but also for SMEs. One of the big costs of India's rapid formalization is that they haven't really got a good error correction mechanism for SMEs. So some of their digital tax and digital registration mechanisms have resulted in the death of many SMEs. Now, again, Bangladesh has a very thriving and strong SME sector. We have to make sure that this doesn't happen in Bangladesh, and we have to make sure that those error corrections. So the call for action is the following. Let us look at services sector by sector and understand how it is currently being delivered and the mix of formal and informal mechanisms through which it is delivered. Then we find a way of replicating that as much as possible digitally, so that the error correction mechanisms aren't killed off, that the error correction mechanisms remain. And in those cases where those the informal error correction mechanisms cannot be replicated, we go very slowly till we fix the formal system that it is fit for purpose for a society which has massive heterogeneity, where the capabilities of a summit or a Walton is not the same as the capabilities of a peanut seller or a small entrepreneur working in the back street. So our digital system has to be fit for purpose for both these players. Our digital system has to be fit for purpose for players who find it easy to include themselves, and players who, for various reasons, political, regional, ethnic, whatever, are finding it difficult to enter the system. It has to work for everybody. So that is the challenge, Anil, and we are really happy that there are people in the Bangladesh government who are aware of these things and who are working to find ways of making this transition the most beneficial for society and the least likely to inadvertently exclude people. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Let me go to Stefan. Error correction. I think that's one of the key things that you pointed out in your speech yesterday. The brilliant talk that provoked a lot of thought. So the error correction. So essentially, what Dr. Mushtaq is talking about is that this error correction is also informal. Service delivery is informal. Error correction is informal, and it may be case by case. So how do we? Digitization is a formal process. So there are steps. You click on something, and then some things happen, and we go to Dr. Nabil to hear about how technology can be adapted to that. So how should we really think about it from a governance standpoint, this error correction and digitization?
Okay. So I'll come to that in a second. To actually be clear about, what are the things we need to error correct. Okay, and I think the way I would think about it is we shouldn't underestimate the underlying opportunity that digitalization brings in the first instance. Okay, and I'll qualify it a little bit, but we shouldn't just see digitalization as just trying to make what is analog in general digital, even though I will pick up on your point that there are things in the analog that we need to think about when we pick up on the digital. So I just want to make sure we frame it, as you're also implying, there is a formalization possible that is lower cost than maybe the analog system is. That's one of the reasons why you do it, and that you want to actually go to. And I want to make maybe first a very general point is that this opportunity is actually partly in services that we talk about, but there is also in areas of the economy, all kinds of opportunities that emerge that actually could contribute to the larger error corrections, what I was talking about at the beginning and in other contexts as well, of the underlying, underlying growth and development model. Okay, so, and we must make sure that we design the systems that these opportunities are there. So I'm thinking there on new forms of exports. Not just undergoing some of the things that the video clip that you showed us, one of the video clips that you showed us at the beginning, and that you alluded to as well, where actually people are not needed anymore for all kinds of tasks, or the automation kind of thing, where you actually say, well, there is deliberate design possible to actually say, well, how do we incentivize a directed technological change that actually takes people along and doesn't exclude them? Okay, so the opportunity is there, and there is a design issue. Now come to that specifically the design issue that you referred to in terms of the inclusion. So let's, and this is where I think it's really interesting what was raised just now, and what Mushtaq is talking about, and you were asking about, is, we have an analog process that does certain corrections, a certain system at work. We risk losing these processes with the digital. There is going to be an interesting trade-off here between, are there new forms of inclusion that we could get through the system that actually need to be weighed in terms of the system design relative to try to copy the analog system. And I think that's where the public policy issue lies, is that we don't want to lose some of these, these methods of actually correcting, to get your land transaction done or whatever. But at the same time, you create an opportunity to actually design it in a way that maybe other people can be taken along. Now, there's a real risk that in the cost-benefit analysis that I described, you just go to something quite utilitarian, the greatest benefit for the greatest number. And in a way, if you think, say, what in India was happening with Aadhaar, was a bit like a calculation of the greatest happiness to the greatest number, even though we lost some people on the way that actually lost access. But we actually created much easier access for a lot of people. So there's this really interesting challenge. How do you design, and with an inclusions lens, the maximum inclusion from the design, okay? And so that is not saying what Mushtaq is saying is wrong. It's an important part of it. But we need to have that objective function well defined. So where do we want to go to? And clearly, when you go to digital, there is a systems change. And you want to actually think very carefully that you don't lose when you go from analog to digital, that you simply digitize analog. And it's that difference between a digital system from a simple digitization of the whole thing. And I think that's a really interesting thing. And I'm looking actually here around me also to brag. It's a really interesting entry point. If we think of a knowledge agenda, how do you research that both what Mushtaq is saying doesn't happen, that certain people lose access, but at the same time that you design your systems to actually increase access of people that are currently quite excluded, and to actually really deliberately do mechanism design and to actually getting your system design going. And then of course the governance point is in a similar way. There are people that get correction. Now they have access to certain things. I don't know enough about it, maybe a birth certificate. There's a way of getting it, or a land certificate via informal ways. You have a risk, I think, as Mushtaq yesterday quite well explained, the person who types in the first name now and is in control of the keyboard creates massive power for this kind of person. So you want to actually then start thinking about, well, you can actually change maybe not just purely from the inclusion point of view, but also the governance point of view, where you say, look, target all your efforts on that entry point now. And you find actually, rather than lots of places where there's error correction, maybe we can actually design the system that there's less correction needed along the way. And it's again that trade-off. And I was just earlier in the Ministry of Finance talking about some things, and I was actually quite struck that senior officials there were willing to engage exactly on this conversation on tax, on issues to do with land, and actually saying, where can we as a Ministry of Finance actually target our resources that we targeted on that entry point? If we say, look, there is no compliance anywhere. So rather than having to have the built-in error correction, to actually begin to actually improve the system to start with. And I think it's a really interesting opportunity also for research to clarify where that point may be, and is there anything you can do? And I don't have an answer, but I find it really interesting what is possible now.
Stefan, thank you. I think design for inclusion, I think that's something that you pointed out that's very, very important. So since digitization approaches, technologies all have come from the West, more developed countries, and we have sort of adopted it, customizing it in our own context. But then I don't think we're applying the lens, design for inclusion. And BRAC has been at the forefront of inclusion. BRAC is inclusive by design from the very beginning. The government could not reach, BRAC reached in many cases. So what knowledge can BRAC actually offer the entire country, particularly to the government, in terms of this digitization journey? And as we talk about new frontiers, so what approach should we use?
And I think, thank you, Naribai. I think we're just picking up of where Stefan left off. I mean, maybe I can share two examples where how this is happening. And COVID was a great time in terms of doing some of these experiments. So for the longest time, we didn't introduce digital money transfer for one of our biggest target population, which is the ultra poor, right? So the whole understanding was that they don't have access to the device, and as a result, we shouldn't design anything which requires them to have access to this device. So it was very, very manual. What happened in COVID? We had to do very rapid cash transfer. to them, just for them to survive. And at that time, then that was obviously the first thing that came about, that people are not being able to go to their place. So how are we going to ensure that they actually have access to the money? So as we were brainstorming, so we thought that why don't we ask them something which we never asked them before, that yes, they don't have access to a device, a phone, they don't have a Bcash account, but do they have a person of trust within their neighborhood who has access to a device? And when we did the survey, and then almost 88% said yes. And so that was the approach we took, that why don't we get that name and get their number, and this would be our mechanism to reach them. And that's essentially, because at that time, speed was of essence. And then, so right now, we could transfer the money soon, and then we sent a lot of audits and others, double checks and balances. So the entire sort of experiment was very, very successful. So essentially, we had to be very, very creative, and in a sense, because at that time the goal was to reach the money to them at speed, and everybody was accommodating, and so we had to be creative. So essentially, inclusion happened, digitization happened at the same time. What happened in education? Again, schools were closed, but our teachers were engaged. Teachers started this notion of phone schooling, right? So we started creating these clusters based on people who are living in close proximity. So 4 students at a time formed this cluster. So they would come to one of the households, and a teacher would call them, and they just need to have access to one feature phone, and we use the conference call mechanism. So when they could not be together, you could actually use the conference call mechanism to get 4 students at a time, and teacher talking to them for 20 minutes every 2 to 3 days while they were studying. So again, these are not rocket sciences, but how you kind of use very basic technology to find a creative solution for inclusion. And I think that was very, very important. So I think this is across the board. I think this is growingly, we are seeing that you're not going to able to have a solution which is completely digital. You need to have some level of hybrid mechanism with an end goal that you need to go there. And essentially, I just want to give the example of also the vaccination, because we all hear about the fantastic Shuraka website that was created by the government very quickly, and we all had to register, and we could print our sort of vaccination certificate very easily. Now, for people like us who had access and were very familiar with the system, it was godsend, and it was better than many developed countries at that time. But then that thought occurred to us, that what's going to happen to people, and I'm sure, anyway, you were very involved in that process, that were the inclusion aspects. What's going to happen to those people who are not? Because when I went to the barber, I asked them, are you registered? And he said, no, I mean, I don't have access to computer. How am I going to register this and that? But what a lot of people don't know about is that since February, this massive public vaccination campaign that was done, where government involved NGOs like BRAC and others, where you didn't need an NID. You were just going to places like floating population stations, street dwellers, and you were mass vaccinating people. And I think almost like 17 million people got vaccinated that way, in a non-digital way, where you were just basically going out there, are you vaccinated? Then convincing them that vaccination is needed and all that. So error correction is happening in very, very creative sort of ways. So I think going back to what Stefan was saying, that we see the benefit of technology in a sense to get to that biggest number and the biggest benefit, but then the design aspect has to have that element of creativity where you can actually bring in the people who are non-excluded. I think that's probably the best possible solution. Thank you.
That's great. So I think the important thing here is the social capital that was actually leveraged with digitization. So Surakha app worked as a registration platform. Many were not registered, but vaccination was given. But I think the public-private partnership of the EPI program, vaccination of immunization of children, that culture, that methodology, that was actually deployed in this case. In the case of, let's say, the digital centers across the entire country, the Union Digital Centers, they also acted as an intermediary. We're discussing them as digital dalal, digital intermediaries, who created the bridge between analog citizens and digital world of service delivery. So I think these are a combination that has worked for Bangladesh. This would not be the case for Estonia or for UK or for US, right? So I think digitization has to be designed right by leveraging the social capital.
And just to add, you're absolutely right. I mean, you use the word intermediary, and I think growingly, for example, we have this community healthcare worker model. We are seeing them, what is going to be their new role going forward, and exactly that intermediary role. They have access to devices. They're going to the household. Can they connect the people who want to the specialists through their devices, right? So I think this role of intermediaries is going to be very, very crucial, and that's how I think you can reach the last mile. Thank
you. Let me go to Nabil Bhai. In terms of the issue of designing, you're the technologist in the panel. In the designing for the government, many AI systems, systems. So how do you see this? So sort of mindlessly copying design from the West. So digitization primarily is driven by Western thinking. Models, approaches, technologies, all are driven by Western thinking, where websites drive technology, right? But we don't have websites. If we do, we don't have access to them. We don't have devices. We don't have the money to buy data packages. We don't have the digital literacy to get it. So we use phones. So how do you see the design challenge? So what Stefan talked about, design for inclusion, because it's the marginalized that we need to support. If we design for them, the rest gets included anyway. So how do you see that design challenge to be solved? What advice would you give the government?
Okay. I think the biggest challenge with the government would be at least in my very humble experience, an unwillingness to experiment. Or I don't know whether it's a personal unwillingness, but it is maybe it's a methodological or a process. It does need to be, there needs to be an acceptance of failure for us to eventually hit a solution that works. If we are going to say that we will design a system by opinion based on no experiential data, because we have unique challenges. There are certain challenges that we have certain understanding from other countries, sure. But then it is particularly for the fourth industrial revolution technologies, we have unique challenges for which we don't have a very clear understanding. And if we're going to spend a lot of time theorizing about it, then I don't think that really works. You probably want to do some short, quick experiments with properly identified target groups, learn from them, iterate. And that willingness to fail, I think, is the first attitude change that needs to happen. So far, what happens is projects need to be successful. But projects are not always successful. In IT, most projects probably are not successful. And it's also true that a lot of people
who
are
successful if they leave some lasted learning. Right? So we don't see that.
No, exactly.
Success can be redefined.
Absolutely, yes. So either success needs to be redefined, or the way that currently people understand success. And this is not just the government, it's really anyone. Like you go to a client who engages a vendor, your software doesn't work, it's a failure. But that's not it. Maybe one of the challenges is not to do such large projects. Maybe to do shorter projects with a smaller budget, with a mobile team, much more mobile team, to get a solution on the ground, learn from it, and iterate quickly. I don't think that our current processes, at least the ones that I've been exposed to, support that kind of thinking or that type of project management or even that type of procurement. So it's not really a technology problem. It's more a management problem and an expectation problem. And if the expectations can be redefined, or the expectations, because let's face it, software engineers don't understand requirements. Someone else has to come in. I have very little idea about the difficulties faced by someone who doesn't have access to a feature phone. I have never faced this problem in my life. Most software engineers have an overabundance of access, maybe. So someone needs to explain to them who you're building for. And that explanation, that middleman is mostly missing. And a document is not going to cut it. There needs to be something more than that. But the expectation from the government most of the time, and again, I'm using the government as a proxy for clients, seems to be that we are driven by success of outcome rather than success of learning.
This is a really, really good point, and something in other contexts, both having worked inside government, I recognize exactly the point that you make, but also the opportunity by the nature of what you're doing. And it's basically, it's also looking even at BRGD and so on, is to getting, we got used to studying where we try something out and then we think we evaluate it and now we get at the end 5 years later some answers and now we come back. By the nature of what you do, A/B testing is of course possible, and actually build that in terms of how you operate. It means also effectively you don't have to declare success or failure, because you do from day one A and B, and you just try and you tweak A, you make AA and AB, you know what I mean? So you keep on trying, but because you're a data-rich environment, you can learn very quickly. And actually, it's not so hard. And I think in a policy environment, this is one of the few areas where you could experiment without being told of by your political leaders that they're doing it.
The biggest success in government is to be able to spend the money. So you don't have to show the results. That's how you're measured. Whether you spend the money there is good.
Yeah, but it's again, no, I totally, and no, don't get me started on that one. But the interesting thing is, that's why I actually say you do actually, by the low cost of experimentation within it, you don't wait for the experiment to complete. You do A, but you do B on a small bit at the same time. And so because you have live feedback, you can very quickly switch from A to B and B and A and so on. And that's actually, we have opportunities. I've seen it in action in Botswana around education during COVID, where they had live updating of the way they were doing the digital learning, and actually quite successfully. And they actually learned during the COVID period to update and improve the way the pedagogy worked, the way the delivery worked. And actually by the end, they could all the time see by learning outcomes in the first grade, all the time seeing the progress and say, okay, that strand is now much better. We all move to that, we experiment further. So you have the data, what no one else in government had in the past. So that's actually why you can actually do it with the digital learning.
If I may add a point, this nature of iterative development is nothing new to computer science practitioners. I mean, in software engineering, we teach a software development model called the waterfall model. We teach it and we say, no one uses this except the government. Because it doesn't work for most cases. A government, the systems tend to work. The most common form of development is iterative, is incremental. Agile methodologies are extremely popular. They tend to work with the scale of software that most of the time we're talking about. Yet it's a matter of not an adoption of technological practices, or sorry, it's not a matter of inventing new technological practices. They exist. It's a matter of adopting them and changing the mindset so that we are happy to go with it, right? Also, I understand that it introduces problems with payments and milestones, but that can be worked. But you're not going to fight the very nature of technology to suit opinionated structures.
The interesting thing is that the government projects work on waterfall, but the service delivery organizations work on agile. They have to. They have to continuously correct. I mean, look at I will come to Juan Bhai and Aziz Bhai, and they'll hear me out. He said, look at the thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of civil servants who are in the field at the district and sub-district level. So they go through like 10 years, 15 years before they come to the ministry. There they have to be agile. Floods come, riots happen, fires break out. You just have to get up at 3 in the morning and make an agile decision. Otherwise, you don't succeed. You don't survive. So it's not waterfall. So how do we bring that experimental agile mindset from the field to the ministry? I think that's what we're trying to go for. So I'll come to Humayun Bhai. You spent a number of years in HY, where you saw this experimentation, and you actually led did some of the empathy training, where we brought in people from the field, and they actually went through the citizens' experience. They had to live through that and design like an experiment to actually change the lives of citizens. And we tried to sort of institutionalize that to cabinet division. So as a representative of cabinet division now, I mean, explain to us how you see the frontiers. We're talking about frontiers, like new frontiers of service delivery. So how is cabinet looking at service delivery digitization through the lens of the marginalized, and sort of, I would say, orienting the civil service, guiding the civil service so that they become more agile, more citizen-centric while they do digitalization?
Thank you very much. In these 3 days, we have seen several presentations that involves the role of the government, also the role of the academics, and also the market factors. I would like to concentrate my talks on government's role, especially the role of the cabinet division. But before I start, let me talk about one significant strength of our people, of our nation. As Dr. Mustaq H. Khan has said that some negative factors also can contribute positively, like he was talking about horizontal network that corrects some mistakes of the society. In 2005 and 6, I was in Japan to study economics. At that time, e-government and digital government was a new concept that fascinated me. So I conducted research and submitted thesis on local e-government in Japan. Back 16 years ago, I found that on the supply side, the Japanese government was very eager and provided all the necessary digital infrastructure. But on the demand side, the Japanese people are not that much interested in using them. Some other studies in 2003 and 2004 also supported my findings. On the other hand, Bangladesh is very lucky that our people is very adaptive. It was proven in case of family planning methods, and it has been shown once again how open we are to the new technologies, like vaccination. In Western countries, we had seen even some processions against vaccination, but our people took it gladly. When our Honorable Prime Minister gave Vision 2021 of Digital Bangladesh in 2008, all of our people, especially our youths, gladly accepted that. When her government introduced Union Digital Center that you were talking a few minutes ago, that system not only transformed rural economy, but also extended beyond physical reach, the mental horizon of our local community. And we are happy, Cabinet Division is happy that we work together with HY to establish digital centers all over the country. It was at that time it was called Union Information Service Center, and our current cabinet secretary, Mr. Khandokar Anwarul Islam, he was additional secretary at cabinet division. He worked closely with Mr. Anir Chaudhuri, the moderator today, who is also the policy advisor of ATY program. Now, keeping in mind of our Prime Minister's latest vision of Smart Bangladesh and developed Bangladesh by 2041, Cabinet Division is relentlessly working to achieve those visions. We took the case of digitalization and service delivery so earnestly that Cabinet Division created a separate wing called Coordination and Reforms, headed by a full secretary other than the Cabinet Secretary. Here I must refer to the contribution of the then Cabinet Secretary, Mr. Musharraf Hossain Bhuiya, who is amongst us, I think, who led the creation of that new wing. If you see the key performance indicators or KPIs of Cabinet Division, you will see that we have 5 KPIs. Out of these 5, 60%, I mean 3 is directly related to digitalization and service delivery. One of our KPIs is e-government, in which we emphasize on simplification of the service and innovation in the official process and also in the service delivery. Another one is national integrity strategy, and the third one is grievance redress system. With the help of ICT division, our grievance redress system is online. Anybody can lodge a complaint if he's aggrieved through that system, through the official websites, and even with the help of the mobile phones. Other than that, if you see the annual performance agreement, APA, you will see that out of total marks 100, 30 is on reforms of the government, focusing on digitalization and service delivery. Out of this 30, we have 10 on innovation. We have about 10 on grievance redress system, citizen charter, and RTI, right to information. On the first day, in his article, Professor Mustaq H. Khan has already emphasized on the symmetry of information for good governance. I would like to mention that, in fact, Professor Ackerman won Nobel Prize for his theory of asymmetry of information in the applied to the market economy. The updated version of Citizen Charter that Cabinet Division has created provides all the necessary information regarding the service, who is to give the service, what is the cost, if any, who is the supervising authority if the person doesn't get the service, etc., etc. On the one hand, this has helped to reduce asymmetry of information. On the other hand, it has also reminded us of the digital divide, that not all of our citizens can avail that opportunity. Later, ATY emphasized on mobile government, mobile phones, that has improved the situation. But I think we need more works to do regarding this. Some of the articles are on social security issues. And as you have already mentioned regarding Corona situation, and one of the focus areas was learning from the COVID. I would like to mention the case of cash transfer to the poor and the lower income people. The government prepared national social security strategy in 2015, when again Mr. Musharraf Hossain Bhuiya was the then cabinet secretary. Cabinet division coordinates that strategy and has prepared the second action plan, which is to be published very soon. There are many reasons why Bangladesh is ranked 5th in South Asia and 1st globally in handling the COVID situation. One was vaccination, which was elaborately discussed by Executive Director of BRAC. Another one is that under social safety net, the government distributed huge amount of money to the affected people. And for that distribution, government took the help of technology, digitalization. We paid the money through some mobile banking channels and also EFT system, link it to IBAS++. Now, because of the technology, we could eliminate duplication of the entries and also the ineligible people from the list of the beneficiaries. Government had targeted primarily to give 5 million families, but later it was found that out of these 5 million families, 1.4 million, almost 1/3, was duplicate or ineligible. So it created a scope for better transparency for the whole situation, for the whole system. That was excellent learning from the COVID that the government learned. Now we have talked about only the past achievements, what we did. If we think about the future, you know that government is first, government learns, studies the situation, then plans, and then go for actions. So our government process is always slow. And the things for the future has made it more critical for us because we don't know where fourth industrial revolution is taking us and at what speed. We are yet to capitalize or yet to conceptualize the probable impact of nanotechnology, genetics, and artificial intelligence, robotics. What are those things, even machine-to-machine communication, how they are going to impact our future? Perhaps more research in the academic field, more research by universities like BRAC and others. Perhaps more initiatives from the market, from the business people. I've seen in Iran that though they are not as open as the Western countries, their businessmen are very advanced in using genetics and robotics. So research institutions and market forces can show us the path where government has to intervene. Cabinet division under the dynamic leadership of our present Cabinet Secretary, Khondokar Anwarul Islam, is trying to cope up with the demand of the fourth industrial revolution. And we are trying to train government officials at the central level and also to the grassroots level like Upazila Nirvahi Officers offices to take the fruits of the technology and also to use them for the benefit of the common people. Thank you very much for giving me this chance.
Covered a lot in terms of achievements and also future, plans for the future. Let me come to Aziz Bhai from the perspective of ICT division. Honorable Prime Minister also talked about smart Bangladesh. That will probably be included in the Mission Manifesto, and then we're thinking about 2041. So what would that look like? I don't think we'll be talking about digital in the next 10 years because everything will be digital. Most things will be digital. So what does smart Bangladesh look like in 20 years, in 19 years? And what is the plan for ICT division to lead that?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Andrew. Actually, almost a lot of things have already discussed. First of all, when this present government came in for 2008, they declared in their election manifesto, the Vision 2050, the digital Bangladesh. Is when take over power in 2009, since 2009 to 2021, digital Bangladesh, people realized now it is the reality. Especially the COVID-19 pandemic, the people realized the practicability of digital platforms in Bangladesh. As my colleague said, the challenge came when the COVID situation was prevailing to distribute the relief. So, apps, the central aid management software played a very wide role. And we started using all digital platforms in the chat, including the distance learning, you see the telemedicine, the food distributions, in e-judiciary also. And lastly, as you say, it is a local grown apps. When we imported vaccine, the challenge came. So how we manage the vaccination all over the country, to the city. So the ICT division, Prime Minister's office, they had a sharing of virtual meetings, how we can solve it. And we go for vendor and they claim 150 crore BDT. We took the challenge of 5 programmer engineers and ICT division, the Prime Minister's office and DC office collectively they work on it and they develop the software. And we manage that vaccination. Citizens got this opportunity where they will do their vaccine in which hospital, which time. So actually, this is a achievement of digital Bangladesh. Recently, our Honorable Prime Minister declared about the ICT roadmap of Vision 2041, Smart Bangladesh. Smart Bangladesh, it's a dream of our Honorable Prime Minister. Though we have developed our digital infrastructure almost, as you know, in digital Bangladesh, we have 4 pillars. The first one is the connectivity. The connectivity division from Bangla government, we have connected from ministry to district, and under Info Sarkar 2 project, we connected from district to Upazila, and from under Info Sarkar 3 project, we connected from Upazila to Union. Now, government, the directives from our honorable ICT advisor, his brainchild, he wants to connect until the village, very, very marginally. So we had planned to make connection in the villages, the government infrastructure like primary schools, community clinic, and also union movie office, land offices, and other government infrastructure. So 1,09,244 connection will be made under this program. So the people have the access from very, very marginal level. And as you know, the Union Digital Center providing the whole government services. And by this time, you know, that about 2,000 government services, 18 are now digitally providing from the government. So under this establishing digital connectivity projects, government is establishing 555 joint research center. This is a sort of digital center. We provide, there will be the startup floor, the plug and play. We will have the training classrooms there, and have access the senior citizen, especially all digital services. Another is very important is that we are installing 57 specialized lab, which is very, very high-ended and advanced technology. There will be the DSL lab, and also the supercomputer we provide there, and you know, for students can use for is the industrial 444 IR, like IoT and artificial intelligence, and also the blockchain technology. So this is already we identified the university, 31 public universities, and others, the government officials like the Bureau of Statistics. Another important is that for 10 digital village under this project we are going to implement. So there will be a digital village station, and under this digital village station, we will provide digital services from these villages, and there will be precision agriculture, and 20,000 digital devices will be provided to the farmers, including the drone technology and IoT device technology. And you know, by this time already started how they will operate the farmers. We are making we are giving the training like through drone. They can see about when the irrigation will be required, when the pest management is required, and also in aquaculture. So they are using this drone, and drone will give them the data of a particular pond, the pH, the dissolved oxygen, the water temperatures, the pollutions, and different indicators of the particular pond. And this from this drone, the farmer can get this data so that they can do the treatment for the aquaculture. So not only the aquaculture, but also the dairy, poultry, and the livestock. So these are very, very important. And another is that government has a plan for food industrial regulation and for smart Bangladesh. The project we have taken enhance the digital government and economy. It's very, very important. How we can make this government more efficient, digital, with very advanced technology. So in that case, you know, as you know, the LICT project is a continuation of this project. Very, very intellectual. So government is adopting the projects right now, not for development of infrastructure, also for for the intellectual based projects. So we are offering especially the skill training under these projects, and also there will be how we can automate the SME, small and medium enterprises, and also the security exchange commissions. This is a demand from their side. So we had workshop today. So different cross sections of the community they came and they put their ideas which we can incorporate with this project. So these are actually the government vision for 2041. How will be our economy? So in that case, as our speaker said about the automation. So yes, we are working for automation in government processes. As you know, 5 organizations like IT First Authority, BEJA, and DIDA. So they are using, they are the one-stop services. So it's very, very comfortable for the investors. When I was working as director of foreign investment in DIDA, formerly that was BOI, Board of Investment, I introduced the automation process. So how the investor can register online from, you see, the US, not to come to do manually, appoint another consulting firm, have to pay about 5,000 US dollars only. And we introduce that one. So if X foreign investor can do his registration online from his country, after that he can also apply for his visa and work from his country. After arrival over here, he can get the on-arrival visa and apply for his work. So this is automation. But at the very beginning, the one of our panel members said the perception, attitudinal change. Some stuffs they are pretty comfortable with the traditional. So traditional features, people will come with them. So that was the traditional, but we have already removed this, and this is working now. And OSS, that it's very, very important for the investment, because we have to look at the investors for investment. In high-tech park, we already started this. Another is, the BND, Bangladesh National Digital Architecture. So BND is very, very important right now. We're working on it. How we can make interoperable with other organizations. Like, we have the NIG. So the information in NIG, we can share with the passport and immigration. We can share with the tax officers, the banks, also CRBS, birth registration. So we try to make a unique ID from this ID, so that we have no need to register, give a data for different offices, only one place. So this interoperability is also trying to establish from the government. And also, we have developed another very, very important software like government resource planning. GRP. GRP is we are introducing in different ministry already. Meeting module, asset management module. So these are we have developed under this project, and we are this is implementing in the planning ministry, and also the foreign ministry. They are using this, and it is very, very important for the government. So e-government is one of the pillars of the government. So under this, we are using. Another is data centers, very, very important. Government has huge data, and also the multinational companies and also the private sectors. So we have 3-tier national data center on this computer council. And we thought we need more capacity, and we have already built the 4-tier data center in Bangabandhu High Tech City, Kaliapur, the 7th largest, and now it has started its activities. It is now functional. The other organization, they are hiring our data center. So this is very, very, very important. And another is, the government is functioning now with electronic note, e-note. So it's very, very important for us, the e-note. So under this e-note, we do not have especially in ICT division, we do not have any hard file. We do not sign any hard file. So we are making correspondence through the e-note. So e-note last COVID, 1 crore e-note is already decision made under this. So it is also very, very important gesture from the government. So we are trying to cover all until the Upajala and union levels, so that a file may come from the union or Upajala to district and then to ministry. So this is also working from our government. And
I hope you have very good backups, because if you lose these electronic files,
yeah.
then you will have no record.
So we are also going into the cloud system also. So yeah, thank you. So this is actually the government is thinking on that, and government all programs are aligning with the 8 5-year plan. We are also aligning with the SDG, and we are aligning also because when in 2018, the present government has another vision, my village, my town. So we want to make our village like town, that is the citizens living in town getting the services. These services we get the people living in the village. So this is actually the government vision. Government wants this. Government do not do anything for it. My last answer: governments get the platform for the people, so people will get these services. And after 2041, government vision, then the planning for 2100 years. So the people will see this. Thank you very much. Thank you, Anil.
Guys, pay for the very elaborate plan of what we will see coming forward. Last but not least, Imran Bhai. So you had a vision for this conference. A lot of knowledge, new knowledge. I mean, one of the things that you keep talking about is knowledge capture and knowledge usage, reuse of that knowledge. So you've seen a lot of knowledge being disseminated here. So what is your plan to capture that, disseminate it, and not just have a conference, right? It's an event. It's a quantum in time, right? But what can happen in a continual basis as a continuum? So what do you see? And how should we think about collaboration across academia, government, for-profit, non-profit, private sector? So how should they all work together, and perhaps even include media in that whole thing?
Thank you. So I think this has been a really good discussion that is happening here, and the whole objective of the conference was really to really understand where we are with respect to the digitalization and new frontiers of service delivery. So part of it was a reality check, and also to start thinking about what the future knowledge questions or research questions should be. And I think from that point of view, I think I'm sort of quite happy where we are at the end of today. I think the big takeaway is, very simply put, there are huge opportunities, but but I think we need to be extremely careful about kind of basic questions of exclusion, basic ideas of power, politics, all of those very foundational social science issues, which I think ultimately are also very important in the way we think about digitalization and the way it can actually be useful. So I think that's the kind of big takeaway. Now, in terms of what we do with this, and in terms of the priority for the sort of future, I think firstly, what we haven't really talked about much in the conference, and I think it's very important, and it's primarily because we perhaps focus a bit too much on service delivery. We have not really spoken much about how digitalization contributes to economic transformation. And I think that really is important as well, because unless we really get better jobs, I think we really are, I think that conversation, I think, has not happened as much. And I think that's a really important agenda to really think about. How does digitalization and skills agenda, for instance, come together? How does it create real economic opportunities, better jobs, good jobs, and so on and so forth? And on that, I think, connecting to the whole thing that Mushtaq has been talking about, the importance of, the sort of informal horizontal networks. I think digitalization opens up huge opportunities for the informal sector in the traditional way to sort of take advantage of growth opportunities and productivity opportunities using digitalization. I think there are huge opportunities here. And I think this is something we haven't really talked about as much. And I think some of these opportunities are one-off. Some of these opportunities are dynamic impact that can actually be created for economic transformation. And I think that agenda is really important and would be really good to kind of discuss on. Now, what do we do next with this? I think the idea is very much, we are right now targeting December 12th, which is Digital Bangladesh Day. And keeping that in mind, what do we do from here to get some outputs? We're thinking about, a book that we want to bring out, as sort of traditional academic institutions do, but that could be a contribution, I think. But what we would really be interested in, which came out very strongly here, is the importance of defragmenting, right? I mean, right now what's happening is the whole knowledge agenda around digitalization in Bangladesh is extremely fragmented, and there are three ways I think they're fragmented. So the first fragmentation is around disciplines, right? So social science and data science are not really talking to each other. Humanities will play a very important role here to really understand, kind of the linguistics is going to be so important for the NLP work, for instance. And then anthropology and digital human and understanding, digital relationships, these are extremely important. And, we actually are not joined up here. So that fragmentation, I think, BRAC University being, university, I think would be a good place where we could basically start really thinking about how do we bridge some of these disciplinary divides and, kind of get more joined up. So that's one fragmentation. The second fragmentation, I think, is really around the global and local. And I think there, I think there are a lot of global interest. I mean, Bangladesh has got a lot of, kind of because of a lot of challenges around regulation and all, there are ways in which data can be monetized in a way that can serve certain types of interests. And unless we really get our local ambition and local agenda right quickly, I think there are actually a lot of risks here as well. So I think the whole data governance and data sovereignty and all of that becomes extremely important. So that's sort of another level of fragmentation between global and local that I think is important. And the third is between the industry, those who are actually developing solutions, and those who are actually in the knowledge sector. I think that is a third level of fragmentation. So I think this we need to defragment and really see how we can get much more joined up. And that's going to be, I think, the more important strategic agenda that I think I would certainly like all of us to think about and see how we can make some progress there. And I think ATOI has a huge role to play in this whole defragmentation agenda. Thank you.
Just 1 second. Sure. Thank you. A very important issues came, I think, from one of the panel members, about the policy support from the government. So digitalization and the smart Bangladesh, whatever we do, the important is that to keep the cyberspace more safe and secure is very, very important for us. So cyberspace and cybersecurity from Bangladesh government, as you know, the Digital Security Act 2018 enacted this. And also the ICT division established the Digital Security Agency and eGov-Cert, as you know. And Data Protection Act, it is going to be, it is already, draft is okay. So in policy support perspective, government is working on it. We have data. Government need to have some data very, very restricted. If it's disclosed, this is the question of the state problem. The problem we faced in the central bank, the hacking took place. So after that, government is very aware how we can keep our cyber space more safe and secure. So government policies support the activities is going on. Thank you. Thank you, Anirbhai.
Thank you, Azim bhai. I've been a very poor moderator, have not been able to keep track of time, but we had a large number of panelists. But even at the risk of taking a few more minutes, what I'd like to do is to go to Mr. Musharraf Hossain bhaiya. Not because he was the former cabinet secretary, but because of the wealth of experience and perspective he brings in. One of the things that we're trying to do from A2I, but then now it's driven by cabinet, is Civil Service 2041. What kind of a civil service we need to have in the next 20 years? What is the skill? What is the experience that they will gain? And what will they do? So in the fight between man and machine, what will they do? So I think that's a perspective that I'd like to hear from you. And how can a university like BRAC University, BIGD, perhaps North-South, perhaps many other academia, and perhaps even Oxford. So it's not just local universities, but a global coalition of academia. How can it support Bangladesh civil service? I think I'd like to hear your perspective on that.
Thank you, but I feel it's unfair for me and for you to tax the audience in terms of time. But since you have asked the question, I'll take just 2 minutes. Here also, I would like to emphasize the issue of defragmentation or stronger partnerships. We need, probably we need stronger collaboration among the government, the academia, along with the research community, the private sector, profit-making private sector, and the non-profits to achieve the shared goal, number one. Number two, we should look at things in a more holistic manner. What Imran Bhai has said, we need to demolish the walls between different disciplines of academia. It's, humanities, social science, and pure technology. And this is more important in terms of digitalization. And all these things are critically important when you think about the transformation of the bureaucracy of the civil service, or in wider sense, public service. That's really important. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's been a long discussion, but I think it was well worth the time that we took. Just three very important things I wanted to mention. So you talked about a book, Iman Bhai. So I think a book will serve a certain audience, but the wealth of knowledge that was generated here and will continue to be generated, has been generated before, I think needs to be processed in other formats. Maybe shorter versions, maybe even audiovisual versions, maybe in tweets. So I think we need to probably think about different processing of this information and then continuously work on that. Second is you talked about that we have not touched on economic transformation, skills, jobs, entrepreneurship, informal economy, because the title of this was service delivery. So perhaps you can design one that's focused on economic transformation and focused on SMEs, youth, and really employment, how employment will actually change dramatically, how entrepreneurship will change dramatically, how gig economy, basic income, those kinds of things will come in the next 10 years. We have to discuss that. And the last thing I would say is many of the things that we discussed here cannot be discussed within government, cannot be discussed within private sector, can only be triggered by academia. Can only be triggered by academia. So I think academia has a very important role to continue this discourse, trigger thoughts, radical thoughts perhaps, skepticism, provocation, and that should be the role of academia, not just teaching students. I think that discourse can be led by academia by involving private sector, for-profit, non-profit, and the government. I think that's a very important role for organizations like BIGD, North-South, Brack University, Oxford. So it happens in other countries. It doesn't happen enough in Bangladesh. I think that it should be taken as a role and responsibility of the academia. So I'd like to end on that point. So thank you to all the panelists for your very deep introspection, reflections. And thank you to the audience, for whatever is left of it in presence, for your patience. Thank you so much. Sit down or?